you guys can say what you want about tough skin, but apparently you're going to need some tough skin if you want to play in the NFL moving forward. You want to know why?
Well, we were talking about smell, but why? It's used prominently in the NFL.
Well, okay. Well, it's going to be used a lot more, especially if they go to 18 games.
They're working on it, aren't they?
Yeah, because it feels like that's on the horizon. Now, Roger Goodell did talk yesterday about the potential and sort of what they're thinking as far as the pushback and sort of the things they need to get by in order to implement this 18-game season. Let's take a listen.
The key thing for us is looking at making sure we continue to do the things to make our game safer. So we want to make sure that that hits the first boundary. The 17 games is a long season. So we want to make sure we look at that and make sure that we continue the safety efforts. You've seen a lot of the outcomes of that. Kickoff's a good example of that, the hip drop. So we're going to continue to do that. That's number one. Working with our players' associations, number two. We would reach an agreement with them if we're going to proceed on that level. But we also, third, and this is not necessarily in order, is the quality of our game. We would do it in the context of reducing the number of preseason games. We think that's a good trade. Less preseason games and more regular season games, I think most anybody would think was beneficial. But again, those other two factors are really important.
I'm going to go
beneficial to their wallets. I mean, that's the truth. If you think about preseason games, who is it most beneficial for? It's most beneficial for the poorest of the NFL players. It's the young players, the rookies coming into the league, because they haven't gotten up to that game speed in a real live game scenario in the NFL. And then it's the back end of the roster guys who are trying to make a roster. Because for the most part, for the bigger name guys who are paid, they're going to make it. They're not even playing. So it's really for the younger guys, the back end of the roster guys, proving to you that they can play. And that's unfortunately in the NFL, the lower income players of the NFL. So of course Roger Goodell, who represents the owners, is going to say, yeah, it's not really beneficial to anyone. Well, it is beneficial. It's beneficial to players. It's beneficial to coaches to some degree. The other thing we don't ever talk about is when you talk about like lack of development, we don't talk about the lack of development with coaching staffs. Preseason games oftentimes now are given, position callers, oftentimes minority coaches that are on the staff, an opportunity to call plays. Because once the real games come, that's not happening as much. But you might have an opportunity to, hey, you're calling the defense, you're calling the offense for this preseason game. Head coaches do that oftentimes to get some of their assistants some real live reps, which is a great thing for young coaches in the league. I hate the fact that since Roger Goodell has taken over, and I'm sure people are going to take shots at me for saying, well, it's a business. That they should be concerned about raising revenue, putting more money and lining the pockets of the owners. You are losing your product. Like you're losing a piece of this in your desire to try to make as much money as humanly possible for these owners. You're going to lose the quality of the game, the quality of the product in many different ways. And so I get concerned about that, and I just hope Lloyd Howell Jr. now has taken over was recently elected as the executive director for the NFLPA. Get lifetime health care. Like, that would be the biggest stamp ever for an executive director, in my opinion, for the NFLPA. If they were able to get lifetime health care.
And do it retroactively, by the way.
That's part of it. Yeah, that's part of it. Because obviously the players who are currently playing in the NFL, they'll receive it. Guys 5 years out, they can receive it. But that comes in saying that. It's going to be for the older generations, the older players. Typically most collective bargaining agreements have put in some protective measures for older players, past generations. And so I'm not just saying this for myself. I'm saying it for guys who are way older than I am that need it right now badly. And there's resources, but just do it. Like, that's the one thing that you can make these owners agree to. Say lifetime health care. That's a win-win for everyone. And then let's move forward. That's the one big ticket item they need to push for. Every player should be for. There shouldn't even be a debate on that. It should just be lifetime health care and figure it out, whether it's for accredited players, 5 seasons, 3, whatever it is. They'll come up with that number. But they need to figure that out more than anything else.
Yeah.
I just think it's almost like an oxymoron to say we want to make the game safer, but then make the season longer. I don't feel like how does that make sense? How do you make that make sense? Other than to say what he said, like the hip drop and the kickoff rule and all that stuff, you're altering a game. And I would say this: you're banking on the fact that the new added way of going about football is better than the traditional style and the traditional way of playing the game. And Roger Goodell has bet on himself, and he has been on. I mean, it's not like he hasn't been a successful commissioner. He has grown the numbers. He's grown the game, the reach of it. It's seemingly working, but I just wonder at what point do you start to look at a product and say it's watered down? I mean, I think they're dangerously close to hitting a space where you might actually look at a game that you truly love in a league that has become America's pastime and look at it and say, this is pretty watered down. You know, that's my concern as I look at it.
Do you guys have faith, though, that the NFLPA is going to push for lifetime health care, that they're going to think about the quality of the player as opposed to the quality of the dollar, and how, like do you have confidence in that? Because I look at it from the outside and I go, look, it could get watered down and lifetime health care is a great idea. I'm skeptical that any of that is even factored in, and ultimately we're going to get to an 18-game regular season within the next 2 years. And what's going to happen is the NFLPA is going to cave, agree to something that they're going to regret 2 or 3 years in, promise it's going to be different the next time around, and away we go with the discussion that's just going to keep going moving forward. It just feels like that's where this always ends up.
I'm hoping it doesn't. I'm hoping we've got, a new leader and executive director, Lloyd Howe Jr., and I'm hoping there's enough strength amongst players where they should push for this. But this is also something that, if you look at how players tend to be able to get things done in the CBA, or even when there's negotiations like that take place in between the CBA negotiations, oftentimes like there's a campaign. There's a coordinated effort and a campaign to kind of get this thing done, and there hasn't been any. So that's the hard part about my hope for what I think would be the best thing moving forward for every player, and it should be a no-brainer in what is the most dangerous sport of any of the professional sports, is push for it and get it. I mean, there's other leagues that have other benefits to what they have, and for whatever reason, the NFL has never set this as a precedent. I should say the NFLPA has never made this a precedent, or their key initiatives of the collective bargaining agreement. And I understand there's a lot of things that go into that, but this still needs to be that one big ticket item and takeaway. The owners come to the table with usually 1 to 3 things that are big ticket things they look for. In this case, we know what they want. They want 18 games. Okay, you want 18 games? Give us lifetime health care. And here are the conditions in terms of which we're saying. Guys who are vested, guys who've played in the league, whether it's 3, 5 years, whatever you do, there's always that point. And the owners will probably dictate that because they know the average career span for most players is under 3 years. So they set it at a mark where it's going to take out, if you do the bell curve, about half of the players who make it in the NFL but never become vested. And then that way that they can have an idea of what that number looks like in the future as healthcare costs continue to go up. So that's what it's about. But that's the one thing. I know I keep harping on this, but it's needed big time, especially for past generations of players.